Let's talk about the Homebuyer Bill of Rights. Is it really a great idea? Is it something special and something new? Something that's really going to help Canadians? Well, that's what we're going to talk about in today's video. But before we get into it, do me that favor, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, hit that like button so more people like you can see this video. And don't forget about our race to 25,000 subscribers, where one lucky subscriber is going to win $5,000 to put towards a down payment or to pay down their mortgage debt or to put towards their investments. It's really up to the winner. But one thing is for sure, in order to win, you have to subscribe. So go ahead, click that subscribe button. It's free, it's easy, and it's definitely worth it. The definitive guide on how to manage your credit. Product, penalty, price, in that order. It's never been more important to get your mortgage right. Okay, so let's get into it. The Liberals launched their Canadian housing plan earlier this month, or actually I guess it was last month in August, and they talked about all the things that they were going to do to help basically curb higher prices and higher costs of living in the Canadian real estate market. And some of the things that they introduced, as we discussed in a previous video, were good ideas. Some of them are just absolute fluff. And one thing that has consistently come up in my conversations with Canadians from across the country, people who are applying for a mortgage or buying a house, is the idea of this home buyer bill of rights and how that is really one of the best ideas to come out of this election. And today we're going to dissect the home buyer's bill of rights because it isn't necessarily what you think, and it doesn't provide as much protection as you actually might be led to believe that it does. So first and foremost, I want to show you how to find this. If you go and you take a look at liberal.ca/housing, there is a huge website dedicated to the Canadian housing plan or the Liberal housing plan. And it goes through and discusses a whole range of things with respect to the housing market and the Liberals plan going forward. Now, we asked the question in the last video, why now? Why not previously while they were in government? A lot of the things that they've suggested here would have been easily passed by all three parties. But the question is, why is this an election promise rather than something that they could have acted on in the last 12 months when real estate prices were going through the roof? Now, that's the first question, obviously. The second piece here is the conversation around that home buyer's bill of rights, which is really interesting from the perspective of what Canadians can expect going forward from a federal level, especially considering that real estate, for the most part, is regulated provincially. So let's jump in and take a look at the key points, the key suggestions that the Liberals are making with respect to a national home buyer's bill of rights. And we'll start off by talking about the first thing that they're suggesting, which is banning blind bidding. Now, once upon a time in most provinces, and actually throughout most of North America, blind bidding was something that didn't exist. A lot of times you saw people going to auctions and you saw realtors basically talking to other realtors and discussing what the offers were in order to allow other borrowers or other buyers to outbid the other one. So what would happen in the past, let me paint this picture for you, is a realtor would write an offer for their buyers, and the seller's realtor would say to the other people that are also competing, well, we have this offer that's this much, you should bid higher. And then what they would do is once the second party had bid, they would say to the first party, well, now you've been outbid, you should bid higher. And this would go on until somebody exhausted their ability to pay more. And it was essentially a live auction while not being a live auction. And the reason why blind bidding became a thing was because of this practice that was deemed unfair. And now what we have is we have all kinds of people calling for blind bidding to go away. And in reality, blind bidding is something that across North America was put in place to protect buyers from having to outbid other buyers. It's bring your best offer, and if your best offer is sufficient, you get the house. And if it's not, you don't have to worry about being bid up. Well, now, tables have turned, times change, and this is something that's being talked about from a different perspective. And whether you believe that blind bidding is a better alternative or a worse alternative, I can pretty much guarantee you that in 20 or 30 years, if blind bidding goes away, we're probably going to find ourselves in a situation where we are talking about going back to blind bidding. So this is an interesting one, and one that is basically undoing something that was previously put into place in order to protect consumers, not just in Canada, but across North America. And by the way, if you want to talk to our friends in Australia about live auctions and live bidding, they're having the exact same problems there that we're having here with respect to bidding. If you're in a scenario where people are bidding against each other, it doesn't matter if it's blind or if it's live, people are having problems, and the economy and the real estate market is having problems with the fact that there is any sort of bidding going on. So bidding in general is the enemy, not necessarily blind or live bidding. Now, the second thing that they are talking about is the legal right to a home inspection, because what happens in hot markets like right now is people basically waive their right to their home inspection. They waive the option to have a home inspection in order to make sure that they're able to get that property. Because what happens is in crazy markets like what's happening right now is sellers will say, well, we're going to accept the best offer. And quite often the best offer is not only the highest priced one, but the ones with the least conditions or the least outs for the buyer. So this is an interesting one. I think that most people should have the legal right to a home inspection. And I don't think that implementing this is a bad idea. In fact, the NDP have also suggested that they would put this into place, albeit they are a distant third when it comes to the actual chances of them being elected. But I think a legal right to a home inspection is a good thing. The downside of this is eventually it will affect sellers, because eventually what it'll do is it'll give buyers the option to have an out, and then it will make it less easy for sellers to sell their properties, and ultimately could have a negative effect on those sellers. You could see people going and bidding on properties, bidding on multiple properties, knowing that they have the right to a home inspection, and therefore they can bid on multiple properties, not have to worry about having one of their offers accepted, because they'll know that they have an out via the home inspection. So this is a good thing, but it's got some kinks that would need to be worked out, and some definite thought would have to be put into implementing this one. By the way, of everything on the Home Buyer Bill of Rights, this is the only one that in my mind really makes a lot of sense. Now, third, we have total price transparency. Now, this is an interesting one, because where I'm from in Alberta, if you want to figure out what a property sold for previously, you can find this out via the land titles. You can find this out via the realtors and the MLS system. It's very easy to figure out what a property sold for previously. Now, I'm not sure about the rest of the country, but I do think that this is a good idea where you have the ability for people to be able to see what a house was previously bought and sold for. Now, the thing is, I suspect that throughout most of the country, there's already ways to figure out from a transparent perspective what a property has been bought and sold for via the land title system. I could be wrong. If you're in other provinces, whether it's Ontario, BC, or wherever, and I am wrong, leave the comments in the comment section below. But to me, this is something, like a lot of the things the Liberals are suggesting here, that already exists. Now, the fourth thing is double end disclosure. So in every province I'm aware of, if a realtor is double ending a sale of a property, they have to disclose it. In Alberta, they have to disclose it. They have to tell the buyer that they can't represent them, and the buyer then has the option to act as a customer where they have no representation, or they have the option to find another real estate agent. Now, in BC, double ending deals is completely not allowed. And in other provinces, there's various different laws and rules that are applicable here. But in most cases, it is my belief that double end disclosure is something that already exists across the provinces. So this is just another one of those federal election promises that really doesn't mean a lot. Number 5 is the beneficial ownership registry. Now, this has more to do with money laundering than it does with real estate, but basically the suggestion here is that if corporations are purchasing properties, it has to be made clear who the actual people behind those corporations are that are purchasing the properties. This has some compelling reasons that would make it viable. It has some compelling reasons why it wouldn't. Definitely with respect to celebrities and whatnot who are purchasing properties, quite often they want to keep their celebrity under wraps so that they aren't basically asked to pay more because of who they are, and so on and so forth. There's definitely some issues with respect to privacy and whatnot there when people are buying multiple properties, but don't necessarily want people to know who is purchasing them, or don't want people to be able to go in and do a corporation search, figure out who the owners of the company is, and then figure out how many properties they own and what their personal net worths are. But for the most part, and at least it's my understanding, in most jurisdictions, you can go and you can do a corporate registry search and find out who owns the company anyways. You can definitely do that in Alberta. So whether this beneficial ownership registry is something that makes sense, I'm not entirely sure, but this is one of the promises that has been put in here. And lo and behold, it probably doesn't make a difference to 99.9999999% of Canadians, but it just looks cool on their Liberal Home Buyers Bill of Rights. Now, the sixth thing is guaranteed mortgage deferrals. So basically, the federal government would compel lenders that in the event of a job loss or some other major personal issue that causes somebody to not be able to pay their mortgages, that lenders would have to defer payments. Now, this is something that has existed for quite a while. It is something that is common. If there's a reason that somebody can't make their payments, there's usually 4 to 6 months where a homeowner can basically say to a lender, can you defer my payments? You have to go through a process, whether that's with the bank itself or with the insurers if you put less than 20% down originally. But this is something that already existed. Now, the key thing here to keep in mind is if this becomes something that is common, the lenders are going to pass on the cost to consumers. It's going to make mortgages more expensive. And it also delays for a lot of people the inevitable, which is the need to sell the house. And at the end of the day, this is a decision that shouldn't be something that is government mandated. This is something that should be the decision of the individual lender, because most lenders have a significant amount of compassion. If they can get away with having a client take 6 months worth of deferrals and then be able to pick up and continue to make payments, they would much rather do that than to foreclose on properties. But they also have the ability to take a look at the client's previous situation, if they've had multiple deferrals in the past, if they've missed payments, and if they think that they are just being taken for a ride. I think it's important to give lenders the opportunity to make those credit decisions on their own rather than having the government intervene. Now, the seventh thing that the Liberals are suggesting is that they require lenders to act in your best interest and basically disclose all the options available to you, including the first-time homebuyers plan. Now, this is interesting that they put including the first-time homebuyers plan, because clearly the Liberals are thinking that the reason that the first-time homebuyers plan wasn't successful was because lenders weren't disclosing that it was available. This isn't the case. It was just a crappy plan from the get-go. It made no sense for most borrowers to do it. And to this date, we have maybe done one or two within Mortgage 360, and I personally have not had a single client that has chosen to take advantage of the homebuyer plan when they knew the full extent of what it meant, especially from an equity share with the government perspective. So this is an interesting one. Now, what would be interesting would be if the Liberals mandated that lenders had to disclose if their penalties were higher, and if there was other lenders out there that maybe had lower penalties, or if they had to disclose that their variable rate mortgages had monthly compounding rather than semi-annual compounding, and disclose it in a meaningful way rather than just in some little fine print in the documents. Yes, I'm looking at you, RBC, and had to basically disclose all the things that actually make their mortgages more expensive, even though they may be paying the exact same rate as somewhere else. So this is really, really interesting. I think this is going to be something that, if enacted, could be useful if it is something that the lenders are able, or not able, but forced to do without just burying it in the fine print somewhere. Really having good conversations about if there's better options out there. If there was, that would level the playing field for a lot of Canada's non-banks, and would also level the playing field for those lenders out there like Scotiabank who genuinely have better mortgages. So in the grand scheme of things, Homebuyer Bill of Rights, there's one or two really good ideas in here, but for the most part, most of this stuff already exists or makes zero difference to the majority of consumers. So, well, it's good in theory, and Homebuyer Bill of Rights makes it sound like it's a really great thing for all Canadians. It's really just mostly political fluff. So I commend the Liberal Party on coming up with a plan and having it seem like it's meaningful. That there are some good things in their Canadian housing plan, but for the most part, these are all just political promises. And if they had any intention of actually doing it, again, my question is, why wasn't it done previously in the last 12 months when you could have done something like pass legislation almost immediately that said that all homebuyers should have a right to a home inspection? That's an easy one. It shouldn't have taken much effort. It shouldn't have taken much work. But alas, here we are, election promises rather than actual fulfillment of election promises or good ideas while you had them. So I don't suspect that we're going to see most of this stuff actually show up when the federal government is actually elected, whether it's the Conservatives, the NDPs, or the Liberals. And we have yet to see what will actually come out of all of this. Will it actually change the housing market? The reality is, what needs to change in Canada with respect to housing is not so much the rules and not so much the demand side things that you could change, but the actual supply side things that need to change, which is the things like increasing the actual number of houses that are available for Canadians to buy, so they become affordable, they become plentiful, and they become something that is actually a reality for most Canadians once again. So if you found this video useful, do me that favor, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. Please hit that like button so more people like you can see this video. Don't forget about that race to 25,000 subscribers, and we'll see you on the very next one. Cheers.